I actually have had 4 total losses, 3 on Turo, and 2 that just happened within the past month. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Oreo, and today we're going to be talking about my experience being a host in New York City on Turo. If you don't know what Turo is, it is a peer-to-peer car sharing app. I'm just here to give my experience, my account, things that have happened, and whether I'll be continuing on Turo. Before we start, subscribe to the channel. There will be much more content coming from cars. I'm gonna try and incorporate a little bit of tech and style. So we're gonna get all 3 of those going. We're probably gonna get some reviews. Subscribe so you're caught up on everything, and YouTube will push the channel so we can reach more people. So without further ado, let's get into it. If you ever see me looking down over here, that's because that's where my notes are, and I don't want to miss anything. So I'm just gonna kind of be between you guys and my notes. Just a little background, I am a content creator and, dare I call myself an entrepreneur, in New York City, between New York City and Boston, and I conduct most of my business in New York City. I'm a power host on Turo. If you don't know what that means, that just means you've earned the platform $36,000 or more in the past year, and you have 4 or more active vehicles on the platform. Rolling it back to the beginning of my journey, I've been on Turo for just about, I started in July of 2022 when Turo had just been officially unbanned from New York City, and they were open to getting hosts back because, they were banned for whatever reason. You can look that up. And, finally some bill passed and they're back in business. At the time, I actually had 3 cars. I had my LC 500, which I will be doing a review on later, my 2018 Lexus RX 450 hybrid, and I had a 2020 RX that I just gotten because the 2018 didn't have all the features that I wanted. So at the time I had 3 cars, and I just didn't want to give any of my cars up. I knew Turo was banned. I wanted to rent out my cars. There weren't very many options. So I was actually going to end up sending 2 of my cars up to New Jersey for a guy to manage them. A couple days before I was scheduled to actually bring the cars for us to do like a 3-month test run, I got the email from Turo that they were finally reopening back up in New York City, and I kind of knew it was my time to shine, or at least hop on the opportunity. And at the time they actually had certain earning incentives, so if the car didn't earn a certain amount, they would make up, or if it did earn a certain amount, they would add as a bonus. I don't remember what those incentives were, but a lot of platforms will add those incentives at the beginning to get people to list their vehicles on the platform. So I actually was one of the first few hosts that was readily available on Turo in New York, and it was pretty much smooth sailing. So pretty great. I mean, small hiccups here and there. I'd watched pretty much every single video on YouTube for, tips and tricks on how to properly run Turo, things to do, things not to do, how to deal with claims, the process and all of that. And things were pretty all right. I didn't get Power Host until about past 6 months. I'm not sure. I know I missed it the first time. They do reevaluation, but pretty much, honestly, Power Host really just means you get a certain credit, and then you pretty much can get to somebody faster. Because that's one of the big things. If anything happens to your vehicle, being on hold is probably the worst thing. I hate being on phone calls to begin with. The quickest way for you to make me not do something is make me get on the phone and have to wait on hold, talk to a machine, go through prompts. It's the worst thing. So being Power Host makes things a lot easier because within, 3 to 4 minutes, I can be on the line with somebody, talking to somebody, and getting stuff done and getting any questions answered as well. I started out with the 3 cars. The 3 cars were good. Actually, during that first couple months, I actually experienced my first really big trip which was a couple $1,000 trip where a guy took my car for about, I believe it was 55 days. And, that was great. He brought the car, it had a scratch. We resolved it pretty easy. So, I started out with 3 cars, and then I added 3 more cars that following October. Following 2 months after, I decided to add a couple more cars. I just kept adding cars. Kind of disclaimer here, I financed a lot of vehicles, and I actually did borrow money from somebody in order to, just kind of have a cushion in terms of, in case things were slow, stuff needed to be paid, just kind of like some startup capital, which, I 100% would suggest doing, having cash just around in case anything happens. I lost a lot of money when I was doing private rentals. I'll get into that maybe in another video. The first couple months were good. I didn't really have any claims. Within the first 6 months, actually, I experienced my first total loss. That was actually a pretty smooth process in terms of dealing with that total loss. Looking back, there were some things that I potentially wish I would have done, but one thing I will say is Turo, unlike most other insurance companies, will actually give you pretty good total loss payouts, is what I've noticed. When I've done some of my other total loss payouts direct to my insurance, the values they gave me were pretty crap. So Turo does a pretty good job of giving comparable payouts. Now, at the time of recording this video, I actually have had 4 total losses, 3 on Turo, and 2 that just happened within the past month, which is not great. One was on a private rental, which was, somebody who had rented from me on Turo before, and then one of the cars that was just totaled was my Corolla. One of the customers flipped it over a couple times. So, things like this happen, and this is why I suggest that you just have cash on hand, because even though for my Corolla, the car was paid for in cash, my Lexus, which was another one of my cars that's currently totaled, still has a note that needs to be fulfilled, and that car has been gone for just about a month and a half or 2 or so. So, that's just 2 months where I'm not making any money. I'm paying interest, I'm paying for insurance, I'm paying for things on the car when, I'm not making money from the car. So that's one thing I would just strongly suggest. Have just a little bit of reserve money, because things will slow down. There are going to be up and down months in the car rental market. Anybody who does it, will tell you. As of recording this video, it's January, and this month has been absolutely terrible for me. I've probably lost money, but that's okay, because I will make the money up later or some other way. That's just one suggestion. Have cash on hand. My first couple months when I had, with my 3 cars, everything was pretty good. Cars would come in, cars would go out. And then, once I started to get around 5 to 7 cars, things started to take up a lot more time. Namely, you will get a lot of, at least me, a lot of my bookings are very last second. I spent a lot of time making deliveries to customers and just getting cars ready for last second bookings, which can be extremely time consuming. There are days where I as a content creator, my job is to create content. And, I wasn't able to do that because I may have had, 2 or so last second deliveries. And I live, near JFK Airport. So getting sometimes to the city where a lot of people may need those cars is an extremely time-consuming process. Sometimes it can take an hour to get there, an hour and a half, depending on traffic to get there. It may take an hour to get back. And then, you're doing that process over and over. That doesn't include, making sure the car is clean, and all of that, other stuff. So it is it can be very time consuming, especially once you start picking up a lot of vehicles. I would suggest, if you are going to do Turo, I'd say keep the vehicles to a minimum, especially in a place like New York, unless you're extremely organized or, you have space for the vehicles. Things that you are going to have to pay for are parking, especially if you don't have the space or you're living in the city. Thankfully, I don't live in the city, but if you are doing this on a street parking type of situation and there's alternate street parking and you don't feel like moving all your cars one day, they could hit you with, 4 or 5 tickets at once. I've been hit with like 6 tickets at 40 or 35 bucks a piece. It can get very expensive very quickly. Speed camera tickets or anything like that. New York City is not the easiest or best city to work in. There are customers here, but there is a lot more headache to deal with here, especially if you're not on top of everything. What I would say is I do not suggest you do Turo if you're not attentive. You've got to do a walk around of the car every time it comes back because you need to pay attention to little dings, scratches, depending on what plans you are on. The top 3 plans on Turo don't pay for wear and tear up to a certain amount, but the 60 plan does. So if you're on the 60 plan and you miss something, then you might not be able to get paid out for it, especially if you don't have the documentation. Turo is very big on documenting everything. You have to, take photos of the car every single time. Lots and lots of photos. I think taking 100 photos of every car every single time is extremely overkill, but it's something that once you do go all through these photos and you have a trip later, you can recap on when damage happened and where, and you just have an accurate history log. I would also not suggest doing Turo if you are easily stressed. Okay, that is more just for renting cars, and Turo is renting cars. So once you are in Turo, you essentially are running a car rental business at whatever scale you're running it at. So if you are easily stressed about your cars, do not do Turo. People are going to damage your cars. They're going to mistreat your cars. People don't treat things that are not theirs extremely nicely because, like I said, they don't own those things, so they don't care. Not everybody's like that, but the general majority of people are like that. People will smoke in your car. People will leave trash in your car. Some people will scratch your car and not say anything until you say something. People will make returns super late and not let you know. People will, park your car in the wrong places. Rims will get curbed. All these are myriads of things that will happen that if you are easily stressed and you don't know how to deal with it, they're just going to stress you out more. People will speed in your cars. And if you are a tracker watcher and you're watching your car at every single moment or every hour, it's going to stress you out. People speed, people take harsh turns. Everybody drives differently and you don't know the story of how they drive. But if you're watching that constantly, you are going to do nothing but stress yourself out. So give people the cars, know you're covered, and that is about it. And if you do that, get out while you can. Honestly, it ruins the platform for everybody else because, customers don't love when you are, texting them, hey, I know how fast you're going, or hey, where are you going? That's none of your business. Leave the customers alone while they have the car. There are some places like across the country where if customers are crossing the border or doing stuff that is sketchy, you might want to keep an eye on that, but don't be a tracker watcher. That's going to stress you out and you're not going to be able to hang, especially when you're dealing with a lot of cars at once. Like I said before, if you are strapped for cash, I think it's something you can do if you own the car. But if you're strapped for cash and you have car notes, I wouldn't suggest doing Turo just because, like I previously said, there are slow seasons. There are times where, your car may not be going out or there's an insurance claim. And, depending on what plan you are on Turo, your deductibles can be up to $2,500. And if you don't have a body shop that might be able to work with you on a consistent basis and give you good deals, then you really might be out, of that money completely, depending on, what breaks or what happens. So if you're completely strapped for cash, I would say I don't think Turo is a great choice. And once you get past I want to say 5 cars, it starts to become a bit more of a job than passive income. If anybody tells you that renting cars out and doing Turo is passive, look at that person, tell them they're a liar, and run away. Because Turo is not passive at all. Like, the most passive it gets is if somebody rents your car long term and you're not going to see them for months at a time. That's when it gets passive. But, you know, a lot of what it is, you know, shorter trips, week trips, weekend trips, a lot of day trips, especially if you have yourself open for things like deliveries. Once you surpass a certain amount of cars, it just starts to take up your time, and it's not really a side hustle anymore. It just becomes something that takes up your time. A side hustle is something you can kind of do, you know, a little bit of, and then, you know, brings you in a little bit of money, but this becomes more of a job once you get past a certain amount of cars. Now, for pros, I will say, there are some pros, it's not all cons. I get to drive cars that I like. I mean, I was going to pay for my LC 500 anyway, which I ended up doing, but now Turo pays for the car for me. It may go out once every, you know, other month or something, but I get to drive cars that I like. I'm a big Lexus guy, so I have a couple cars from the lineup that I get to drive whenever I want, and it's fun. Obviously, the money is nice, depending on how much you need to deal with. If you're dealing with a lot, the money at some point isn't really worth it, especially with Turo sometimes feeling like a race to the bottom, and, you know, other people not knowing how to price their cars, and, you know, you being forced to drop your prices. Sometimes the money's nice, but it's not always worth it, I'll say. Another pro, I've learned a lot about body shop work. I've learned a lot about insurance, and I've learned a lot about the car buying experience. So, you know, that's just something that will help me further down the road, and it's just given me a lot of knowledge. It's helped me with client relationships as well for other purposes. You know, you get to meet a lot of types of people, and, you know, you can build your network that way by renting your car to certain people. I mean, it depends on the fleet you have, but that has been a pro for me. I've met some good people. As for cons, I will say it can be very time consuming, especially in a city like New York where everything is moving all the time. I got a lot of last second bookings, and even now I still get a lot of last second bookings. And when I say last second, I mean people want cars within 30 minutes, or, you know, somebody's been canceled on 4 or 5 times and they need a car like yesterday. So it can be very last second. Doing things yourself as you get more cars will become a lot more time consuming, such as detailing, washing cars, and keeping track of paperwork. Another con is going to be you have to be organized, and you are going to get things such as tickets and tolls and speeding cameras, and they're just going to be expensive. I mean, I would suggest getting a separate card for all of that stuff, because that stuff will add up. Currently, my EasyPass rebill is about $500 on one of my EasyPass accounts, and I have 4. If you are in New York, I would suggest just trying to start with a fleet account. I haven't transferred over to a fleet account for other reasons, and, you know, just the cost associated with them. That is something, this is not Florida, this is not Boston, where the tolls are 35 cents and, like, you know, they can fly under the radar. This is, somebody goes to Jersey and comes back, you're looking at about $35, $40 potentially in tolls. And if they sped too fast past the toll reader, you might get a mail by plate with a fee of $50 that you might need to figure out. There's all of those, you know, fees and everything that adds up, which makes me strongly dislike New York City, but that is a whole different story. Another con is buying cars. And like everybody else kind of says on YouTube, which I didn't understand until I experienced it, don't buy a whole ton of cars on your credit, on your personal credit, because it will screw you. It will catch up to you, and, you know, you don't want to do that. You don't want to have to, you know, keep running inquiries and fleeting and defleeting. It's not the greatest thing. I can make another video on, you know, suggestions, or you can watch, you know, other people's videos on how to get multiple vehicles at once. at once, and there are ways to do that, but your DTI will flip, and that's not going to be fun trying to get anything and doing anything. I mean, it's something that I've dealt with and that I still am kind of dealing with. Like, I've made, a substantial amount of money to kind of combat that, but it doesn't work all the time. So you don't want to do that. And then especially as you start to get more cars, if you have 4 cars already and you want to go to get a 5th car or 6th car, and you already aren't making a crazy amount of money yourself because the bank's going to ask what your income is, then you are going to start dealing with higher interest rates. And higher interest rates are not fun to deal with, especially looking at what a higher interest rate is costing you per day per car. It is a crazy thing. And, I will say in the past, I've paid up to $20 per day just in interest on certain cars, which is crazy. Interest rates, you don't want to get too many cars because the more cars you try and get, the more the companies will catch on and they'll just try and screw you in interest. And the last thing is trade values. The second you take the car off the lot, you are going to be upside down. I'll just give you a quick rundown on that. You drive the car off. If you try and turn around and sell it in a month, the car could be worth the same thing, but you're not going to get that because that is what the market is asking for. And the dealer needs to make money on the car. So they're not going to give you that. If the car is worth $30,000, they might give you 26 and you need to make up that other 4,000 because they need to make money when they resell the car. So, I mean, that's really just the easiest and simplest explanation on you losing money on trades. You're going to need to make up that money some way, somehow, whether it's, you're renting the car and then you get out of the car one way or another. But that's a whole separate video. My advice would be to add a tracker to the car because you will need it. You will need to track your cars. I mean, we're in New York City, one of the highest places for fraud, and people will try and steal your cars. Add a tracker, add multiple trackers. I'm not even going to say how many trackers I have in my car, but there are multiple ways of tracking my vehicles. So that is something that would be very important. And that was really the only way multiple of my vehicles have actually been recovered. Next, like I said, not getting too many cars on your personal credit. And if you can, try to get cars in cash. But I mean, in this day and age where a lot of people might be trying to do this as a side hustle, I know that's like not really possible. And I mean, if I did have $50,000, honestly, I wouldn't even just drop it in one car. I'd spread it out over multiple cheaper cars. So there's that balance that you kind of need to figure out what works best for you. But, just don't put too many cars on your credit. And for photos, you want to get more than less. Like I said, I think 100 is a bit overkill for every trip all the time, but getting around 30 to 40 photos outside, inside is going to be something that you should do. The last thing is just have a good relationship with, people that you will need. Here's who you're going to need. You're going to need a good detailer, a tire guy. You're going to need a relationship at the service department for the certain types of cars you have. You will likely need a mechanic. However, I buy extended warranties and everything with my cars. So I just go to a certain dealer and they help me take care of everything, especially if I've talked to them and they accept the type of warranty company that I have and they can pay with them directly, then that's just something that will happen. So having a good mechanic as well, having a good body shop, because it's not if, it's when accidents happen and things physically happen to your car that you will need a body shop. And, body shops can help save you money, and they'll be able to work with you after, building that relationship with them. Going private, I will talk about in a separate video, but for now, that has been my, New York City Turo experience. It's been pretty all right. It's definitely been sometimes a bit more of a headache than I would like. I'm not an easily stressed person, so it's been, something that I'm able to deal with. I'll tell people stories and they're like, I don't know how you do it. And it's like, money goes, money comes. These cars are really just a tool. You cannot get too attached to the cars because things will happen. I love the ES that is totaled and now it's gone. But there are thousands and thousands of other cars that you will be able to get if anything does happen to your vehicle. So will I continue? As of now, that's hard to say. I think I will continue probably for the next year or so and then reevaluate then. I'm doing a lot of restructuring and just kind of figuring out what the next steps are. At one point I had 13 cars and now actively, I mean, due to recalls, I have about 3 cars that are down due to recalls, which have no fixes, and then 2 cars that are now totaled. Car notes for pretty much all 4 of those cars that have recalls and totals. So it's been a lot. And I think that it's something that is not for the faint of heart. You've got to be able to be really resilient and learn and be able to pick things up quickly. My Turo experience out of 10 would be, not sure. I mean, I have ups and downs. Support can be up and down at times. You know, it depends on, you know, who you talk to, your documentation. Like they just denied one of my claims for an over mileage, like little things like that. But you learn to deal with it. Out of 10, I'd say my Turo experience so far has been a solid 7. 6.5, 7. It hasn't been the greatest, but it hasn't been the worst. There are weekends where I just make boatloads of money. It's been up and down, but I'm gonna continue for now. And you know, I'll give you guys an update once, you know, I deal with all these changes. If you guys want to hear more about Turo or tips and tricks, and if you're not subscribed, go ahead and hit the subscribe button because there will be much more content coming. I'm gonna try and be consistent on this channel this year. You will mostly see it in shorts, but there will be this long form content that we will be creating. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. I'm out.